this is Sophie Wilson, and you are listening to the Slow Boat Sailing Podcast.
Support the Slow Boat Sailing Podcast on patreon.com/slowboatsailing. All right, greetings from Ecuador. I'm Linus Wilson. We had a very long passage to Ecuador. A lot of it ended up being coastal, but at least 4 days of it were well offshore. And so that was kind of the delay in getting this podcast out. Last Wednesday, Jana and Sophie and I were under quarantine, and we did not have enough internet on our phones to upload a podcast. It's always a challenge coming into a new country to get the internet up and running, although I think we have a good system now. We use SIM cards, local SIM cards in the country, and use our unlocked iPhone as a hotspot, or I do. The first guy that sold me a SIM card and gave me a top-up, he gave me $15 of the top-up, but not the $30 that I paid for, and I only was able to buy 500 megabytes with that, and that went very quickly. Not enough for a podcast. Then I went to a local retailer at the mall here after we got out of quarantine, and that was basically on Thursday, and was able to get a top-up on my SIM card so that I can bring this to you from here in Ecuador. But I'll be leaving Ecuador soon and going back to teach school and relax in Lafayette, Louisiana. I guess some people that haven't had a phone bill in a while will say that Wi-Fi is free. It definitely is not free. There are some marinas, and this one, I'm not at a marina, I'm at a yacht club, the Porta Lucia Yacht Club, and my boat is on the Hard, and it's about 10 feet off the ground right now. And they do have Wi-Fi, but, the last couple weeks I've been trying to contact some people in this who are actually cruising in French Polynesia right now. And, in both cases, they found that the Wi-Fi was just not good enough to conduct an interview. One, we tried an interview and it just didn't work. And it wasn't on my end, it was on their end, because, when you get something for free, probably the quality's not going to be that good. And really, the quote free Wi-Fi you get as part of a marina, or if you kind of steal it from somebody, is just not good enough to usually or to record a podcast or upload a podcast, because it takes a little bit more speed than that. And so, I think if you really want to have internet that isn't really super slow and has somewhat reliability, you have to pay for the SIM card. So, I bought 2 SIM cards in already. I spent, $90 on SIM cards and buying the data so far just here in Ecuador. I spent probably over $200 in Panama while I was there to do that. I recorded one interview over Wi-Fi with SV Prism, and I'll probably bring that to you in a few weeks. And unfortunately, the sound quality was not so good. It was part of a Wi-Fi I had at a marina in Panama, which I also had to pay for. I had to pay $10 for a week of that, in addition to paying for the week of slip fees. But it was just too slow, and that's in part because if you have anything that people aren't paying for, there's just going to be too many people on the bandwidth, and it's just going to slow it down. So you should always think that the Wi-Fi you get is going to be slower than the internet you're going to get over a cell phone network through SIM cards, probably because the SIM cards are where they're getting the Wi-Fi from. They're probably, unlike the U.S., I think very few foreign countries have telephone lines or lines in the ground, that it's all through the cellular networks. So it was just me, Sophie, Jana, and Daly on the passage. And what I saw from the weather charts was that the winds are adverse, that they are pretty much on the nose coming from Panama City. They come from the southwest, and we wanted to go southwest from Panama City to Salinas, Ecuador. And Salinas is on the southern part of Ecuador. And so you have to sail past Colombia, past most of Ecuador to get to Salinas. Salinas is too south, so we ended up crossing the equator. And if you want to see a very tame shellback ceremony, you could check out the video on our Slow Boat to the Bahamas Facebook page. I noticed that SV Dallas, our episode 10 guest, just posted a video of their shellback initiation ceremony, which had included a lot more hazing than Jana suffered through on our page. So when you cross the equator, the tradition is that you go from being a pollywog to a shellback, and King Neptune has something to do with that ceremony. The winds are pretty steady, 11 to 16 knots, force 4 from the southwest. So our strategy was to get westing on the coast of Panama, then go offshore and try to maintain your westing as long as possible, whether it be motor sailing or sailing close-hauled. And really, sailing close-hauled, you're going to lose your westing, or you have to do a big tack to the west or northwest. So we first took advantage of Punta Mala, and I believe on the bonus episode with Trey Benefield, which I think is episode 22, if I remember, available to Patreon supporters, he mentioned the really strong currents that push you west from Panama City around the southern tip of Panama, which one of the points is Punta Mala, and it lives up to its name in terms of its roughness. And so we went around Punta Mala, we went around the southern tip, and then the problem is that the land starts going up to the northwest, and so there's kind of little benefit from going along the coast. If you go along the coast, if you're sightseeing, that's okay. But if you're just going along the coast to get to Salinas, which we were, takes you away from your goal. You get farther away because you're heading northwest as Central America curves northwest. So a lot of people will attempt this passage from Costa Rica to get a decent wind angle, but that also means it's a longer passage. And we weren't in Costa Rica. We had to get there. Plus, you got to check in. We did all that. We'd run out of time, basically, for Jana and Sophie, because they were only in Panama for 3 weeks. So we went offshore. It was pretty consistently bad winds, but the swells were 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 meters, or 3 to 6 feet, and so that seemed about at par for the course, about as good as you can get in this region. I think if you're going offshore, you're probably, most people would say, you wouldn't want to be sailing in less than 1 to 2 meters. Even if you'd be unlikely also to find anything less than that. We found less than that in the Gulf of Mexico, which has a lot of calms during the summer. And sometimes we found a little bit less than that in the Caribbean, but not much. So we kind of motored on 81 West for a while, and it rained for 3 straight days once we went offshore of Panama. and it was just miserable. Water was coming, sluicing inside the cabin. Sophie was seasick. Jana felt seasick, although she was not throwing up. And so the other thing was, we're motor sailing because we have such a terrible wind angle. We kept on doing that until we were averaging below 4 knots motor sailing, because basically the wind kind of shifted more on the nose. So then we took our most favorable tack after 3 days, and we tacked into shore on the northern coast of Ecuador. So we'd gone far enough that we weren't going to hit Colombia. Our weather routers warned us not to go to Colombia because of the kind of bad weather you'll get off Colombia. The Colombia also is kind of the threat of FARC and that type of thing. So, for instance, I was looking at some British reports because there was a recent Ecuador earthquake in northern Ecuador to find out the impact of that. And one of the things I saw with that is that the British government warns its citizens not to even go to the border counties or the border region of Ecuador because they're worried about their citizens being kidnapped by rebels within Colombia. So, that being said, a lot of people visit Colombia, including many of my guests. The World Arc goes through, I think, Cartagena, Colombia. So I think there are safe places. We went to Providencia, Colombia, which is far out of the FARC's zone of influence. But, I think you have to take that into account, even if you're going to ignore it, that on the Pacific coast, but also on the Caribbean coast, that there is that kidnapping risk. And so on a podcast, for instance, that I appeared on, they've, for instance, interviewed people who've been kidnapped in Colombia, who were doing exciting trips that became more exciting than they wanted to be. Then we tack in to land, and then we're kind of, we don't have a lot of sea room, and we tried motoring some more. It was really slow getting around the northern coast of Ecuador. It got a little better as we kind of turned south, and we could get a little bit better wind angles to motor sail. Then our engine conked out about 50 miles before Salinas, or the Porto Lucio Yacht Club in La Libertad, which is right next to Salinas, which was our destination. And then we started sailing the rest of the way. We had kind of 10-knot winds. We put up full sail once dawn broke. The thing is, my boat doesn't point well. It's a little wide. It's got a lot of stuff on its deck. I've got extra halyards that's going to also make the upwind performance not as good. And so it's got a fair amount of windage. And so we've got, if we're tacking, our angles are not 90 degrees between tacks. It's more like 50 degrees between tacks. And so you're not going to make a lot of ground. So we had a headland in front of us, and so we did one tack, and we had to turn northwest when we want to head south. So, or southwest. So that's kind of a slow proposition. So we had really kind of 24 hours after the engine conked out, 50 miles to go. And we could make, 3 to 4 knots if the wind was steady, but we would go down to 2. So we made kind of slow progress towards Salinas. And I asked the people that follow the Facebook page, and I reposted that on a couple marine diesel forums, about, what happened. So I was kind of fooled because I had just put more oil in, and then the oil pressure light went on right after I restarted the engine, and then the engine depowered, and then it died. And so I was fooled it was an oil pressure problem. I should have been looking on the the frequently or the troubleshooting section of the manual under engine dying or engine not starting instead of the oil pressure light. But I looked under the oil pressure light and it said you have no oil, you got dirty oil. So I changed the oil, around 3 a.m. or 2 a.m., 1 a.m. and woke Jana up to do that because I think she came on watch at a different time. And then that didn't do anything, and we couldn't start it. And so I asked people. A lot of people thought, well, maybe if I bypass the oil pressure sensor. But the key thing is that I don't think on my engine, probably not on most engines, that if the oil pressure light goes on, it's not going to shut down the engine. There's no automatic shut off. And a few commenters realized that. And I want to thank our episode 4 guest, Addison Chan, who is just such a resource to all boaters and boaters going to Cuba for realizing this and convincing me of it. So he commented. Also Ryan Clapper and Paul Denton, also and David Bettis, all on Facebook, came to the conclusion, or at least pointed me in the direction that, hey, if the engine's dying, it's an engine dying problem, and the most common engine dying problems are you're not getting air to the engine. So I changed the air filter. I put in a new air filter right before we left. I did right before we left. I did a new oil change. I did a new. I changed both the primary and secondary fuel filters, but I had not changed the fuel filters since going, and that was once I changed those about 7 miles north of Salinas. Engine started up and worked fine. The primary filter in particular was very dirty, so I had probably delayed too long to refill the diesel, and that stirred up some. And I also probably was using some dirty diesel. And I used pre-filters before I put it in the tank, so I've got a filter that has a screen, and it also has a trap to trap water and diesel, which makes it harder to use because you always have extra diesel or gasoline at the bottom of the funnel, but it also probably saves you a lot of heartache in terms of not getting water in your gasoline or diesel engines. So it was dirty. Once I changed it, then I was able to get it started. And one of the problems was that we drew this passage. Jan had come to the conclusion that the V berth was too wet and it was too rough to sleep in, and so we started very early on. We started sleeping in the middle berths, the settee berths, but we still had all our stuff in the quarter berth, which is the back berth, and that's where you have the engine access. And so I would have been probably quicker changing the filters, but I had to spend like 3 hours moving the stuff from the quarter berth to the V berth. And we actually have a lot more room, I think, now. It's in the V berth. The V berth has a little bit more room. I think Jana, for a long time we were able to all sleep in the V berth. Me, Jana, Sophie, and 4-pound daily dog. Sophie's been getting bigger, and Jana doesn't feel like she has enough room there, so it's kind of a good switch now to kind of make the quarter berth our berth, and Sophie gets a settee berth because I think that she's just getting bigger, and there's just not enough room for the three of us in the V berth. So on the sail up to Salinas, as we're making our final approach, I saw kind of big splashes, and I thought, well, that must be some sort of rock or something and some sort of waves. But it was actually humpback whales, which are in the Bahia Santa Elena, which is where we are. And we saw 2 of the humpback whales come very close to our boat crossing from port to starboard, and I actually filmed a little of that and snapped a few pictures of that as we were coming up. We got in around 11 o'clock once we got the motor running, and we dropped our hook in front of the marina, so we didn't have to get a tow into the marina the next day. But we were put on a mooring, and then we had to wait, I think, a full day because to get cleared. They cleared us. We got in really early in the morning, and then late they came in. You know, the fees in Panama and Ecuador are really out of this world in terms of the customs fees. We paid $520 to check in. That's also supposed to include our ZARP, but that will only be like our ZARP which is our checkout to another port, the Galapagos within Ecuador, and then whatever Galapagos is going to cost is extra on top of that. Just outrageous fees. And then, to renew so I can keep the boat here for 12 months, or actually 10 months, I have to pay another $150 for the renewal through our agent who does not speak English. So that's not great. The bonus of being in Ecuador is that unlike Panama, it does not rain so much. It's pretty dry here. It's also a lot cooler. So the Humboldt current, I think, affects Ecuador. Even though you're on the equator, you'd think it'd be really hot. Ecuador is actually very cool compared to Central America. And it's a lot less humid, so the boat's going to keep well compared to, you see those horror movies that Nikki Steiger puts out on White Spot Pirates about the mold on her boat when she first got it in Panama. And, even the places that we're going to store it in Panama, there's 3 places you could haul it out in Panama, all on the Caribbean coast. The problem is that keeps me upwind of the Galapagos, so you have a really tough passage to the Galapagos. We got rid of the tough passage this year by coming to Salinas. So next year, going to the Galapagos, it's, close hauled to beam reach, to broad reach, to the Galapagos, and it should be downwind most of the way from the Galapagos to the Marquesas next year. And next year is going to be the big year, over 4,000 miles we need to travel to the next haul-out facility, either in Atutaki or in Tahiti or Raiatea. All those are places in French Polynesia. So that's kind of the thinking for coming here. Salinas, La Libertad is kind of a ritzy area. This is a real working yacht club, kind of high-end yacht club too. I'd say it's more high-end than the yacht club than I went to. The initiation fees for my yacht club in New Orleans, I think, was $300. And the initiation fees for 5 years in this yacht club is $5,000, and so it's kind of expensive to stay on the hard here in their parking lot. But it is a nice place. It's got good security, and there's not a lot of alternatives in this part of the world. So the other place in Ecuador, a lot of cruisers come to. Not many cruisers, I would say, come here, and there are really none on the hard right now, or cruising size boats, I would say. There are some cruising size boats that are on Med-More slips. They go to Bahia Caraquez, more north in Ecuador, on a mooring, and I think they do have tended moorings, so it's possible to leave your boat for a long time there. I didn't want to do it because of issues of chafe. You very much dependent on the person that's tending it. The other problem is that the earthquake hit very close to there, even though they are still operational, so I don't really know kind of the impact on the area of the earthquake, but it's over it's probably 40% of the price of coming here in Salinas. You're going to have a little bit worse wind angle coming out of there, so you might want to do some coastal hopping before you go along. The problem with Ecuador is they've got ports captains, and every time you go to a different port and very few ports of entry or very few ports that yachts are allowed to stop in, you pay extra. So really the kind of freedom of port hopping you would have in most places, including kind of the U.S., is not here, and you pay a new agent a huge fee every time you go to a new port. So I'm looking forward to putting Panama and Ecuador, the land of port captains, in my wake next summer. This week I talked to Gail and Rob from Miss Lonestar. It's a real fun interview. They're real nice people. Here it is. This episode is sponsored by Jennifer Clark's Gulfstream. Satellite oceanographer Jennifer Clark and professional meteorologist Dane Clark have over 35 years of experience helping sailors on blue water voyages. Their current charts, crossing waypoints, and personalized weather advice help sailors take advantage of favorable currents and minimize the impact of unfavorable ones. A link to their website, their email address, and their phone number are in the show notes.
We're Rob and Aubrey Kamek from Sailing Miss Lonestar, and we have crew of two aside from us, Bianca and Blake.
How old is Bianca?
Bianca is going to be 7 on the 4th of July, and Blake is 4.
Okay. My daughter Sophie is 5.
Oh, wow. Do you guys live aboard?
No, not full time. Part of the time.
Oh, cool. And where are you right now?
Panama.
Oh, cool. Rob and I go back and forth. We haven't been to Belize or Panama, but we've been discussing where we want to end up when we are too old to sail.
Okay.
Belize or Panama.
Well, usually you have to be pretty old to be too old to sail.
You think so?
Yeah. I guess you haven't met many cruisers.
I hear a lot of people change from sailing to trawlers in their 70s.
Yeah, like mid to late 70s. Yeah.
We've still got a long way to go for that.
Yeah. So what's the name of your boat again?
Miss Lonestar.
I thought that was the name of your old boat. Is that the name of your new boat too?
That's the name, yeah.
Okay, so you changed the name of the new boat.
Yes.
Okay. I guess probably the first thing that comes to my mind is the name Miss Lonestar. Where did that come from?
Well, we're from Texas, and so we wanted something that represented where we were coming from.
I read something that said you were from California. Is that right or no?
I was born and raised in California, and Rob is from all over, and we met and married in Texas.
Okay, all right. Your family's been from Texas, yeah.
Yeah, the powerboat Miss Lonestar used to sit on a lake in Austin, Texas, and it was my dream to retire and sail in the Caribbean. So that's, not sail. At the time, it wasn't a dream, but we took the powerboat on the lake, put it into Kima, and then took it 1,350 miles to the Keys, so we lived aboard for about 8 months.
Okay, cool. Well, that's a long trip.
Yeah, it was. It was. With no experience, it was a longer trip than you can imagine.
So, so Miss Lonestar was just a name you guys thought of. It wasn't like it's like a beauty pageant or something like that.
It is a beauty pageant, but that is not why we chose it.
Okay.
It was a sort of a cute and snappy
All right.
name, and I looked at the Coast Guard documentation, couldn't believe it wasn't taken because everything in Texas is Lone Star or something, so we grabbed it.
Ah, okay. Well, that was quite a bit of searching. I didn't even know you could search for names like that.
Yeah, you can do a vessel search through the Coast Guard maritime division or whatever. Just do a basic search to kind of narrow down what you want to name your boat so you don't get rejected.
Oh, really? They reject names? I didn't know that. I thought there were multiple boats of the same name.
No, not Coast Guard document. They have to have a unique name. That's why you get a lot of 2s and 3s. The state registration, it doesn't matter, but with Coast Guard you've got to have a unique name.
Oh, well, I guess we got lucky with Contango when we changed it to Contango.
Yeah.
Okay.
How'd you come about the name of your boat?
It's a finance term referring to commodities that become less valuable as you get closer to the delivery date. So if you have pork bellies, the price of the pork bellies get less valuable typically when you actually have to hand over the pork bellies, because people don't want to hold on to the pigs. So anything that has storage costs will
that sounds
experience
about right for a boat.
Contango. Contango is important if you're in the oil business, because that's a feature of the oil markets too.
Interesting.
Not really. Okay. So I'm interested in your trip on the power boat from Austin. I'm from Louisiana. We live in Louisiana.
Right.
Did you guys go through the ICW of Louisiana?
We did. We took the ICW from Kima, and our first stop was Lake Charles. We had to divert because, I don't know if you watch our YouTube channel, we have it all there. It was pretty funny first day. I've no experience, and and we're looking and trying to figure out our stops for fuel, and a lot of the fuel stations are non-existent, even the ones that are brand new on GPS. Excuse my rookiness or naivete, but we're thinking we would get to Intercoastal City, but we had to make a diversion when all the fuel was no longer there. So we went to Lake Charles, where we proceeded to shoal our boat, have to call for a captain to bring us out. We had a big dinghy and a motor on the back, so I thought the first thing he would want us to do when he arrived was to drop that. So then I thought, well, I'll pull on the boat a little bit and see what happens. And I got it to move when I went sideways a little bit, and then I got ejected from the dinghy. It was kind of like
his eyes were as big as saucers, because we had just seen some alligators pass us, and as he's falling in, I'm shouting, "Watch out for the bull sharks!" And I didn't see him get wet, but he was wet. He got out of the water so fast. But we ended up making it to Contraband Bayou that night, and the people were so nice. It was a pretty rough day. We were sunburnt and beaten and ran out of gas, shoaled the boat. Day one.
Didn't run out of gas. We actually had 40 gallons, but our tanks were reading empty. And next day we made it to Intercoastal City, which was a really interesting place. Cheapest fuel on the ICW. I think we only paid $2.85.
Isn't that the place that was desolate?
Yeah, desolate, like not even a restaurant.
We saw 4 people.
Yeah, it was weird.
Well, there's I've been to Intercoastal City. I kayaked there, and there's a little convenience store there.
What? Yes, the one that's
on stilts.
On stilts, yeah. You kayaked there?
Yeah.
Why?
I wanted to kayak the Vermilion River from the source to the sea. It was a fun trip.
Eaten by a gator?
I did not see any gators until I got to the Gulf of Mexico, and then I saw tons of them.
Ugh.
Yeah, there were gators there, and we traveled during July, so it was strangely, heat index was off the charts everywhere we went, and it was like the face of Mars when we got to Intercoastal City, just desolate ghost town, hot, sunburned, wow. But we got fuel the next day, and in a powerboat, your trip is so dictated by fuel. We were learning. And the expense of it makes it a lot of times uncomfortable and not as good of a time. So we made it to Homa the next day, and we found that the ICW got really pretty after about Morgan City, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And we stopped in City Park in Homa. You know, they have like a little dock where you can. I mean, they have slips for about 3 or 4 boats, and we were the only people that had been there in 2 weeks, and that was cool. And we hung out with some kids in the park, and our kids got to play, and we took
kids with no parents.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
Aubrey taught these kids how to throw a casting net off a bridge, and we were listening to all their dreams and aspirations. You know, little kids that wanted to be pro football players.
He was a 210-pound 9-year-old, so I think his aspirations were pretty in line.
It's been one of the coolest things about our trip. We really just spend the time to get to know people, you know, wherever we go. And it's been a real bright spot to our trip for the most part.
So what kind of powerboat did you have?
Cruiser's yacht, 3375. So it's a 33-foot, 37 overall. You know, it's more of a weekend cruiser that we ended up learning. There was a Princess stove, electric. You know, everything is driven by, you know, fuel or gas on that boat. So, Princess burners, two burner stove, no oven. We chose not to have a microwave in it because we don't really use a microwave anyway, and we wanted the storage space for, you know, area that we used, and it was separated by curtains, so the kids had a little bedroom aft berth that they shared that otherwise would have been a couch area.
That was interesting.
Little tiny head, like a V berth, but again, a curtain that separated everything, so it was pretty close quarters for a while.
10 months.
Okay. How much did it cost, to go 100 miles on the ICW and that?
It was real easy to calculate. 1 gallon per mile.
Okay.
The trip cost us about $6,000 in fuel.
Wow.
From Kima to Tavernier, I guess is where we put in. But probably one of the most unique and interesting parts of the trip was going up the locks in New Orleans and going out on the Mississippi. It was way over its banks, and we had some interesting words of caution by the lockmaster. And it's interesting because you have to call for you have to call the river control for entrance, and they tell you how to navigate essentially.
They're real jerks too. They're very proud of their bridges, and if you don't say it right, they're really mean to you. And no one gives you a class on how to, maybe there is a class, but we didn't take a class on how to use the radios for bridges and locks and what the, what the protocol is for that. And it was really interesting. And a lot of the people have such thick accents, you cannot understand what they're telling you to do. And then they treat you like an idiot. But we made it through okay. That biggest lock we went through going into Harvey Lock. Yeah, that we rose up, 20 or 30 feet?
No, it was more like 12 or 13.
Are you sure?
Well, it could have been 20. I don't know. The river was over its banks. They said by 50 feet or something. It was a 20-knot current.
I guess you're not turning around. Don't miss your turn.
No.
They said that the lockmaster told us when you get into the river, watch out for trees. And he says, when I say trees, I'm not talking about a log. I'm talking about an entirely uprooted tree that had been flooding up north. So, with the leaves on it and the root systems, the smallest thing that we saw was a house door.
Your front door.
Going flitter flop right in front of us, and you're moving at 20 knots. Plus your 3 or 4 or 5 knots that you're pushing yourself anyway. We saw an ocean liner that was stacked. Who knows how many containers it had on it.
Hundreds of containers. So hundreds of diesel trucks basically stacked on this thing, going 25 knots down this river, and your eyes are like saucers. And it was stressful, I think.
Never seen anything like it.
Never seen anything like it.
The force of the Mississippi was so great. It was amazing.
Well, I was kind of toying with the idea of going down the Mississippi to Venice, Louisiana, to cross the Gulf of Mexico. I never ended up doing it because another sailboater said it was crazy. You don't want to do it. There's all kinds of logs in
I
addition to
would
the
do it.
traffic. The other thing was the winds were not right for me to cross straight across, so we had to actually get easting on the Florida coast.
Right. Yeah. Well, we moved along, and we got to around Orange Beach. What was the little island that we stayed at?
In Alabama?
Yeah, it was right next to Dauphin Island. It was a really cool spot, and we hung out there, and then we got back in the ICW and went through the backside of Alabama, and the next day we made it to Fort Walton Beach, and we made a short. We got up early, and then the next day was really interesting, taking the ICW back through the back end of where Apalachicola comes out.
Mm-hmm.
The water was so beautiful. It was dark like coffee. The lake was that dark, but there were dolphins, and it was desolate. It was
like
really neat.
Dark brewed iced tea, not muddy, clear. And then when our wake kicked up, it looked like frothy sugar or frosting, and it was white on top of this brown tea. It was really, really pretty. We even saw a dolphin, which
Bald eagles.
and bald eagles. The dolphin seemed really out of place in that water because
Really?
it seemed brackish.
Yeah. Yeah, but we made out to Apalachicola, and we made Carabel the next day, and we were going to cross the Gulf 165 miles to Clearwater was the plan. And everybody says, for your wife's first crossing, make sure it's about as calm as it can be. And we held off in Appalach for 4 extra days, and Carabel 1 extra day, just to make sure the crossing looked well. And it was, forecasting 1 to 3s and, 5 knots of wind, and, we ended up getting 7s, and, in a power boat, that was significant. So we made about 45 miles of, beating pretty much, and getting, waves cross bow.
I'm down below with the kids, and we all have our own bucket we're vomiting in. I thought it would be a good idea that morning to have coffee, and that's it. And then the kids had
You had cookies too.
Oh yeah, I had an oatmeal cookie. I'm like, oh, it's got oatmeal in it. And the kids had donuts and juice, and we're just down there green in the gills. It was terrible.
Oh, man.
But we turned with the waves, and we still had a very long day. We made it 110 miles, and we got to Swanee River, which was a really interesting place. We had to throw it on the hook and wait for the tide to rise, and only got in, probably with a foot of water underneath our bow.
And we don't have that much draft.
No, yeah, it was.
On that boat, what would we have?
It was 3
feet.
3 foot. So that was an interesting spot. And then we made Clearwater, and then it was blue-green water and kind of pretty. We just kind of hung out and decompressed for a week or so, and then we made it to Marco, and then after Marco we made it to Tavernier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so by the time you got to the Keys, you decided you wanted to sell your boat. It was getting too expensive. Is that it?
Not quite. We have, 4 of us aboard, plus an 80-pound dog, and whatever critter, I've rescued and collected. And the boat that we were in, just, even though it was 37 feet, 33 feet technically to live on, living on that full time, it wasn't meant for that. And so we had gone back and forth. We thought about maybe a trawler so we could have more space, but we love the lifestyle so much. We wanted to make it a little more comfortable for ourselves. And we had a sale that we were going to go through on a Matthews. What was it, 48?
Yeah. We were selling our boat, and we had a buyer, and then we were thinking the trawler route. So we had found a good deal on a Matthews trawler, had a lot of character, and thought it represented something that we wanted. And it didn't work out, and then we revisited the idea of sail. We had our first dock neighbors were sailors, and they had a Veneto, and they were really impressing upon us the values of sailing. And we stay in touch with everybody we meet pretty much. And, we just thought about it. We sat on the dock and had a beer and discussed it. And we thought, we really want to go far, and we don't want to be bound by gas, and we want to be able to be self-sufficient. And we'd had the opportunity then to be on board a lot of boats and think about it a lot. And, we, did some searching and found this boat for sale in Maine, and we bought it sight unseen.
How much time passed between you selling your powerboat and then buying the sailboat?
We actually haven't sold the powerboat yet, and that was the problem. We don't have a lot of money saved up, and we own the powerboat, so we were going to have to sell it before we could buy something different. And it's actually the subject of one of the films that we're putting out now. I was looking around on Yacht World, just daydreaming, seeing what was available, and I saw this listing that said lease purchase, and I thought it was a scam. The boat didn't seem to be priced appropriately for the features that it had, and it just looked kind of scammy to me. So I called the broker, who is in Maine, and she explained that this was a boat that had been donated through one of those IRS boat donation programs to the Maine Maritime Academy, and that the terms on the boat were to essentially purchase it for 30% down, make payments on 30% over 3 years or so with 0% interest. And for us, that seemed kind of like a no-brainer. We had just enough money after we delayed the purchase for a couple months. We had just enough money to make the down payment and to pay all of our expenses to make it happen, and we got it taken care of.
Interested in how you guys take care of kids on the boat and keep it moving too, and in good shape. So maybe you could give me and Jana some tips on that, because I think it's always a challenge for us when Sophie's aboard. Usually one of us is kind of occupied, so it's kind of like the other one is solo sailing. And it's usually going to be Jana, and she really likes to sail, so she's not crazy about that arrangement.
It is difficult when your kids are so young, I think, from the other sailors and parents that I've spoken to. There's a captain and a nanny, and that is kind of how we've had to do it in the past, too. And it is a struggle, and we hope as the kids get older and more mature, they can become more crew, instead of...
Or just maybe even more babysit themselves. We have 2 kids.
Yeah.
Sir Dog.
And they're both pretty young. And when did they start? How old were they when you guys first got on the powerboat in Texas?
Blake was 3. And...
No. Yeah, I don't think he was 3.
Yeah, he was 3.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're coming up. It's our 1-year anniversary on the 15th of July.
Anniversary of owning the sailboat? Or the
anniversary of living aboard.
Oh, living aboard. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So as far as keeping everything straight on the boat with the children, I think the key with that is to have less things. The less things you have, the easier it is to keep things in order. The less things you have, the less there is to keep in order. So as far as the kids each have a small box of whatever they want to put in it. If they want to fill it with seashells or they want to fill it with, action figures, they can, or books.
No Legos.
No Legos, yeah. They have a certain amount of space, and if it's important enough to them to take up a portion of that space, they can keep it. And when they want to get something new, they have to get rid of something out of their box. That's kind of how we've done it, and it's worked out pretty well. The less we have, the easier it is. And you know what? Kids really don't need that much. He's like, our little boy will get a stick and a rope or a fishing net, and he will entertain himself all day. Bianca, she will have a coloring book, and we have one of those easy reader pens for her that'll help her, get through some of the words on her pages. And, she entertains herself, and it's all about having less. And I think that's the whole point of living aboard, is learning how to be happy with less and sit with yourself and entertain yourself and enjoy what's around you without being a consumer.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was definitely an issue for Jana is the the amount of work it is to homeschool. And, one of the reasons why I kind of like our summer schedule now is that at least we're not taking her out of school and having to catch up, and that takes more time out of Jana's day. It's not just that the kids or Sophie needs to be entertained. It's also, Sophie needs to keep up with the lessons at her school so she can come back on track.
Yeah.
So
Right.
how do you manage the homeschooling for I guess maybe the youngest may not be of school age, but the oldest is?
I guess the answer to that is unschooling. I mean, there's only a certain amount of things that you have to teach your children, like how to read. We knocked that out in a couple weeks. Math skills and science and things like that are all just kind of what happens in a day. Like, we'll talk about the tides and the stars, and when we catch things, we'll dissect things, and it's kind of a school of the world. And I know that that's frowned upon with some people, but, I think they're going to do great.
Okay, so you're not necessarily following a particular curriculum guide or anything like that for the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we took reference from the state of Virginia, looking at their curriculum for a first grader, and what was required to meet the objectives for first grade education, and we tried to take up the daily lessons to reflect that. And we find that there's so much more time in the day to do more things that we do those things, and sometimes that's just the kids finding what is interesting to them, and then us researching it and figuring it out and having fun with it.
Yeah, I think the other issue that came up on our Bahamas cruise was that Sophie had a hard time finding other playmates or other children her age because the cruising community is so old that they're typically retirees in their late 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there are so few boats out there that actually have kids, although you may not have run into that because you're kind of just going along the U.S. coast and you're probably not really in the cruiser bubble yet. So we might be able to find a lot of kids locally, whereas in the Bahamas, there just weren't that many kids besides the Bahamians, and that's who Sophie ended up playing with when she was in Stocking Island.
Yeah, our son is a little bit of a loner. He likes other kids, but he likes to do a lot of fishing, and he's very imaginative. He loves to play, kind of by himself with his little action figures, and we'll play. He's not yearning for as much social interaction as our daughter does, but if we are in a place where there's not a lot of children, she makes friends with adults really well. One of her best friends was a 67-year-old lady, and they watched cartoons together and paint each other's toenails and make cookies, and she loved it. And she's been able to become a really good communicator with adults because of that. So I think it makes kids more adaptable.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends. I think Sophie is a very, very social girl compared to maybe me or her mom.
Yeah.
That she's very social, and so she does miss, I think, her playmates.
We've met up with a lot of friends who, it's very fortunate with us having this YouTube channel and, the following of Facebook or Twitter. We've been contacted by a lot of people who are doing the same thing as us that have children. And I'm thinking about, some Canadians we met up with that were aboard a catamaran, and they had 4 children. And, they were doing a refit for a time, and we were hanging out together. And, we do a lot of, boat visits with other people. It seems like doing what we're doing, it's maybe in a lot of places, it's, like you say, less common, but people find us and single us out and contact us and really, come to visit, hang out. We have a lot of friends that come and visit, friends that we just met pretty much. and they bring their kids, and we have little get-togethers and events and barbecues and parties and stuff, and it's really cool.
I have one more question about the kids. I watched a few of your videos, and the thing I noticed, they're typically not on, but it seems like you have one person filming and one person talking, or maybe both filming it together, and where you just have the camera set up. But I rarely see the kids, and I'm wondering, are they just sitting in the background quietly, or what? Where are they?
Do interviews, usually they're playing, just depends on where we are. If we're up top, they're down below. If we are at a beach, they're in the surf and we can see them. They're kind of behind the camera. Sometimes we include them in interviews, but they're not that interested in it. And then as far as, I kind of plan out a lot of what my shots are going to be. I don't know if you've known this, but when we took the trip from Maine to where we are now here in Connecticut, we had my mother watch them because it was a little bit of a dangerous sail. So they weren't even here.
Okay, so maybe that was part of what I was watching.
Yeah, so when we were in the Keys, they were always in the videos. You can kind of hear them in the background. And a lot of times I'll modulate out the bickering or whatever's happening in the background. So that's some editing magic, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
Okay. All right. So what's your plan after Connecticut?
We're going to be done with the refit on the boat here in about 2 weeks. We've decided that we're going to go back to Maine for the summer because we kind of blew out of there and it was still snowing and it was frigid and we didn't have the greatest experience. So we want to go back and visit Maine. We established a lot of friendships with people and we saw a lot of places and heard about a lot of places we want to go to. We want to go back to Maine for the summer, and we want to explore that area, and then we want to also hit a lot of the few of the things that we missed. Boston Harbor. Want to spend a little bit more time in Martha's Vineyard and Block Island, and then we're going to go down the Sound and go through Hellgate in New York and make our way along the coast to North Carolina. We'll probably tuck in the ICW for a few days, and then we'll make our way along the shore to around Fort Lauderdale, and then we'd like to do a crossing to Bimini right in early November. We plan to spend the next cruising season entirely in the Bahamas.
All right, so check out links to the show notes to see where you can find out more about the crew of Miss Lonestar. If you want to help out the podcast, you could write a review. That's a great way of telling people you don't know about how much you like it. It's a big boost to me every time I see one of those 5-star reviews. You can also support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is a great value. You get the bonus episode with the crew of Miss Lonestar and bonus episodes going back all the way to episode 10 with SB Delos. Plus, you get my $9.99 value audio album version, which is available on iTunes, but free to patrons of the podcast, of my book, How to Sail Around the World Part-Time. Thank you to Presmec, our newest patron, who also gets a free version of Slow Boat to the Bahamas as part of being a First Mate patron. I'm going to start going to a 2-week schedule. In 2 weeks, we're going to have 4 hands on deck, and that'll be a fun interview. Goodbye for now. Have some fun on the water. I'm Linus Wilson.
Hi, I'm Jana Wilson. Thank you for listening to the Slow Boat Sailing Podcast. Subscribe to our free newsletter at slowboatsailing.com.